Since we're on the topic of sexuality, one of the things you touched on in your book on evil was kinks, sexual fantasies. I think the point of describing that was that we often label that as evil or bad. What can you say about what you've learned from kinks and sexual fantasies from writing that book?
So the reason I included kinks in evil and sexual conversations in general is because it is so often thrown into the same conversation. So if someone comes to me and says, Julia, I want you to help me explain why this person killed this other person. And they'll often say, did you know that he or she was also into insert kink here, or insert non-traditional relationship structure here, or insert whatever? And I respond to that by going, okay, so? And I think people use these words like, oh, he was really into BDSM, and think that that's going to have this really important impact on me. Or, ooh, they were swingers. And so, and again, I go, yeah, that's almost like, and in other news, they were swingers. It's like that is not related to this crime at all, unless one of the partners was killed. But people see this as a defect of character, and kink is very much seen as a defect of character in many circles, especially in sort of broader society. And that is wild to me because if you look at research on sexual fantasies and kinks, a lot of people have at least one. So a lot of people, BDSM being the most common, are engaging in or interested in BDSM. So things like choking, or things like restraints, or being degraded, or doing the degrading of other people in bed, consensually, of course. That is something that a lot of people fantasize about and a lot of people engage in. And so these kinks and these fetishes, they are much more commonplace than we sometimes think about them as. Now, on the other hand, we obviously need to be careful not to assume that because in pornography, BDSM is almost ubiquitous, it feels, that means everybody wants this. That is absolutely not the case. But we also don't want to marginalize it and say it's almost nobody. It's somewhere in between. And the main thing is always just to ask and to have open conversations about what it is that people actually want in bed, and to make sure you have things like safe words. So putting in the restraints to make sure that these interactions are safe and consensual, and then being able to explore. And I mean, there's everything from, pup play, where you dress up as a puppy and you engage in either just general frolicking or sexual behavior, to other things like blood play, which is when you pierce the skin to release some sort of blood. That can be scratching, that can be cutting, that can be of yourself or your partner. That can be this idea of, I don't know, it's this taboo thing you're doing together, and it's sexy in its own way. And so everybody has their own versions of what they find attractive. And rubbing up against people, sort of unsuspecting, pretending that someone's sleeping. There's this wide range of things. And I think people also feel often deeply ashamed about the things that they are interested in. And I think that is also really sad, because it makes it more likely that people are going to not be able to live that part of themselves, and also that they think there's something wrong with them. And that can spiral into things like, am I evil? Am I bad? Am I a bad person because I have these fantasies? And that ties in, unfortunately, with homosexuality and bisexuality, and the way that certainly historically and in most parts of the world still today, these queer lives and queer identities are still villainized. They're still seen as lesser, as bad, as a sign of a defect of character. And if people see that within themselves, they're going to think differently about themselves, and society is going to treat them differently. So it's all about destigmatizing.
I really liked what you wrote about, I guess it was in the context of BDSM, or maybe sadomasochism, or maybe just the submissive dominant dynamic, like why that might be appealing. The disinhibition hypothesis. I guess this applies generally to sexual fantasies, is if you live them out, that you could just let go of all the bullshit that we put up in normal society. That you could just be all in, fully present to the pleasure of it.
Right. And that's what research has found on fetishes, especially on BDSM, is that the reason that people say they like it, I mean, it's hard to explain why you have a fantasy. But if you go into the finer questions and really dig deep, you can find that people will explain a version of, well, I can really let go. And I don't have to, if someone is telling me what to do, then I don't have to make any decisions. And I've spent all day making millions of decisions. And I don't have to in this context. And I really like that because it's freeing. And so that's that disinhibition hypothesis, is that the reason that we often go to things in the bedroom that in other contexts we don't like or even find repulsive. Like, I don't in normal life potentially want to be told what to do. But maybe when you move into the bedroom, you go, yeah, but this is a different context. And I kind of want the reverse of what I want in my day-to-day life. And so I can also understand like furries and that sort of completely living as another species of it even it's a really interesting psychological phenomenon of release and of letting go of social pressure.
But I think that also applies to, because you mentioned submissive, that's more straightforward to understand. I think that also applies to dominant. Because, like, yeah, you don't have to walk on eggshells. It's the clarity of it. That was really interesting. Like, having read that from you, that really made me think that there is a deep truth to that, to like being true to whatever the sexual fantasy is. Like, it's not just the fantasy itself that's appealing. It's the being free in some sense.
It's the being free, and the juxtaposition there is that you are free because of the fiction. Like, you're play acting, but it's touching something deep inside you psychologically. And so that's where it sort of feels weird, but it also makes sense. I mean, this is also why we like fiction, because it allows you to maybe be somebody else, have someone else's thoughts in your mind for a while, and you really get to live it as that for a bit. So I think, yeah, the truth and fiction sort of circle is always an interesting one.